Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to today's webinar on attachment of earnings in Sage 50 Payroll. My name's Alice, and I'm going to be your presenter for the session. And I'm also joined by my colleagues Tina, Ollie, and Matt, who are going to be answering your questions throughout the session as well. So I'll begin with an introduction to attachments and the different attachment types that can be set up in Sage 50 Payroll. We'll then talk about working out how much to deduct, so whether that's a specific amount or a calculated amount from the attachment tables. Then we're going to see how to set up and assign these attachments to your employees. Followed by processing attachments, having a little look at how they look on the pay slips. And we are going to finish with an optional quiz as well, just to test your knowledge on a few of the things that I've mentioned throughout the session, just to check that you're paying attention, of course. So first section then, all about the attachment types. There are 17 attachment types in Sage 50 Payroll, and these are all going to be relating to different debt deduction orders that you might receive from a court or other issuing authority. I've actually grouped some of them together as well, just to kind of show you what they are, as they do cover kind of 5 broad categories. So I've got a screenshot of the 17 types on the right-hand side there, but let's take a look at those categories that I've put them into. So first of all, we've got debt deductions, which are references 1, 4 and 12. These attachments are classed as priority and non-priority, and it will be made clear on the information that you receive regarding whether it is or isn't. So these attachments are 1971 priority, 1971 non-priority, and the fines enforcement attachment as well, which is an attachment that has tables to calculate the amounts, and we will talk about that in a little while. Next category is child maintenance. These are references 2, or more commonly reference 14, which is child maintenance 2012. The main difference with these two attachments is that child support 2012 uses a protected earnings of 60% instead of a specified amount, which the other child support attachment does. The next attachments, these relate to community charge and council tax debt. The community charge is the official name for poll tax from the 90s. They aren't very common at all nowadays, not really used, but they are references 5 and 6. Then you've got the council attachments, which relate to all council tax debts, reference 7. And then reference 17 is the Welsh council tax attachment as well, so that's got its own category just at the bottom there. We've then got Scottish earnings arrestments, so that's references 8, 9 and 10 that they fall into. And some more recent types of attachments, which are benefit debt deductions, and these are otherwise known as direct earnings attachments, and you'll see those in references 15 and 16. So there is a normal rate, DEA, and a higher rate, DEA, and DEA just means direct earnings attachment. So I did want to begin just a little bit of an introduction to the different attachment types. But let's move on to the next section, which is going to be working out how much to deduct. There are 2 ways that the attachment amount will be deducted. The first option is a normal deduction rate. So if an order has a normal deduction rate, it means that a specific amount would be deducted each period. And often these attachments will have a protected earnings amount, and this is an amount that the deduction must not reduce the employee's net pay below. So let's say the protected earnings for an employee was £1,200. The attachment wouldn't be able to deduct an amount that would take the employee's net pay below that protected earnings of £1,200. So as a result, if there was some of the attachment that couldn't be deducted because of the protected earnings, in some cases it would carry that amount forward into the next period and then deduct it then if the protected earnings allowed. And then lastly, for this first way, there is also an option to set up an admin fee as well, where you can deduct £1 per attachment towards your costs. This is optional and it will come off of the employee. And then the image on this slide this is an image of a CAPS attachment, just as an example really, but that is a type of attachment that would tell you how much to deduct each period and often what the protected earnings are as well. So that is the first way that an attachment could be calculated. The other way to calculate an attachment deduction is actually the attachment of earnings tables. So this is usually using tables with bands for either weekly or monthly paid employees, and it's usually a percentage of those earnings to deduct for the attachment. And on this slide, I've got a screenshot of an example with a council tax attachment. So the top little drop down there on that screenshot just is selected as council tax. This attachment does have tables for weekly and monthly, we can see just there, and they're actually found in the company legislation in the programme. So if we look at the weekly side, let's say I've got an employee whose attachable pay is £280 per week. So their deduction rate would actually fall into that second last category, so the second last row on the left table, and as a result, their deduction rate would be 12% towards that council tax debt. And the good thing with these tables is that they are built into the programme already. You'll find these in the company legislation, and I will show you that in just a moment. And as I said, at the top of that screenshot, you can see you do have an attachment type drop down where you can select the attachment type and view the tables for that. And also an effective from date as well, so you can double check that this legislation is the most up-to-date tables. But let me just turn my camera off. We're going to go into the first demonstration of today's webinar and have a look at where we'll find that legislation. So in Payroll, I'm going to go to my company tasks, just from the stack in the bottom left, and up to legislation. You'll find all legislation in the programme in here, so we've got tax, national insurance, parental pay, but we're actually going to go across to the AEO rates. So I can see as well in this attachment type drop down, I've got that the 17 different attachment types just there. Now, not all of them have tables. So you'll notice 1971 priority doesn't. For example, there's nothing here. Same with the kind of older child support attachment as well. But one that I do want to show you is council tax. So that does have rates in here. We've got that weekly table and the monthly table. And I'm also going to make sure that this effective from date is the most up-to-date one. So effective from 1st of April 2007, just to double check that those tables are correct there. And for council tax as well, I'm just going to point you towards this note at the bottom. So we can see that where the attachable earnings exceeds the highest entry shown on the table, which for weekly would be £505, for monthly would be £2,020, the highest entry will be used for the earnings up to the attachable value, but then anything over, so anything over that amount, 50% will be taken. And I will show you an example of this a little bit later on in the demonstrations. But these legislation tables are really handy. They can also help you to establish the type of attachment you've been given. So sometimes you might be given information with tables, but you're not sure which category to use. Little top tip, if you come and look in this drop down here, and just have a look through the different tables. So we'll look at fines enforcement, for example. You can see tables in there. Same with the DEAs. Double check through these, have a look at the deduction rates and things, and you'll be able to kind of decide which attachment it is from there. But let's just go back to the slides and we'll move on. So what counts as earnings then when it comes to attachments? Well, it is most payments that are subject to tax and national insurance that should be included in the attachable pay. So this includes wages and salary, including bonuses and overtime, holiday pay and other advances as well, pension payments if the employee is being paid through an occupational scheme, and statutory sick pay as well, which is actually the only statutory payment that does count towards attachable pay. What's not included is statutory redundancy pay, statutory maternity, paternity and adoption pay. And as always, I have linked a little bit more information at the bottom of this slide if you would like to read more about attachments in England and Wales. Great, so I did want to start with a bit more about the attachment types, how the deductions can be calculated, and what counts as the earnings as well, before we move on to actually setting up and assigning these attachments. So when you receive an attachment order for an employee, you'll need to decide whether or not to deduct a £1 admin fee. If you do want to do that, there is a drop down where you can specify that you do or don't want to deduct that admin fee. So you'll see that on the left screenshot there. And you also have the option of adding a replacement description as well for attachments. So this would replace the text on the payslips and some various reports as well, which I'll show a few examples of a little bit later. And it would also change the name on the screen where you enter the payments as well. Then on the right, you would also need to check that your pay elements are set up correctly and subject to attachments where necessary. So you can see tick boxes for community charge, council tax and other attachments. So you'll need to make sure that the pay elements are set up for any payments that count towards attachable pay. But let's go straight back to the demo and I'm going to show you where to check these settings. So I'm going to stay in the company tasks, just in that bottom stack there. But this time I'm going to go up to pay elements, which is just 2 above legislation. These are my pay elements, which I'll be coming back to in a moment. But for now, we're going to go across to attachment of earnings orders. We can see those 17 attachment types in here. We can see that admin fee column as well, and the replacement description column. Now, I'd actually like to charge an admin fee on the council tax attachments. So on reference number 7, I'm going to go across and just change this to specify yes instead. And as for the descriptions, I am happy with most of these, but there is a few that I would like to change. I don't feel they're very descriptive, so I would like to kind of make it a bit more apparent that they are attachments. And that's going to be reference number 1 and reference number 4. So I am just going to change these names to priority attachment of earnings and non-priority attachment of earnings. A little bit more descriptive, makes a little bit more sense to me and hopefully the employees as well of what these attachments are. To save this as well, you would just click OK. But I'm actually going to go back to payments and we're just going to check these settings now as well. So I've got pay elements for overtime, commission and expenses. Overtime and commission, these two are subject to tax and national insurance and they should be included in the attachable pay. So I'm going to double check that they are. So select the pay element, click edit at the bottom, and I need to make sure that these tick boxes for attachments are ticked on the right hand side. So this means that my overtime pay element is subject to all of these attachment tick boxes. I'll just check the same for commission as well. So select that and click edit. And again, I can see community charge, council tax and other attachments are ticked. So that is included towards attachable pay. And then last one is going to be expenses. And we can see no tick boxes are ticked in this one actually. So expenses isn't included towards attachable pay. It's also not subject to tax and national insurance. So in my case here, they're going to be cleared and I just need to click OK. Little top tip from us as well. So if you are troubleshooting why an attachment isn't deducting, or maybe it's not deducting the amount that you're expecting, it is worth checking these pay element settings to check whether the pay elements are subject to attachments, as if they aren't, but they should be, that's likely why it's not going to be deducting as expected. But I'll click OK, and that is the pay element settings. So it's now going to be a case of assigning the attachments to my employees. I've got 3 attachments that I need to add, one for each of my first 3 employees. So I've highlighted them. I'm going to open up the record. And beginning with employee number 1, I'm going to go to employment, down to pay elements, and then across to attachment of earnings orders. So this is where you would input the details of the attachment. See the attachment name. This first employee's actually received a council tax attachment. So I'll scroll down and select that one there. If it was a Welsh council tax attachment as well, just remember that is reference number 17. But it is just going to be 7 for today. And as we saw in the legislation earlier, council tax is an attachment that uses tables. So you'll notice it has actually ticked this box at the bottom of this window. And this tick box basically tells Payroll to use the rates tables for those attachment types that calculate using the tables I showed you earlier. We've then got the normal deduction rate and protected earnings. Now I'm clicking in these, but I actually can't edit them. And that's because council tax uses the tables instead. So that deduction rate is calculated for us by Payroll. Same with the protected earnings, so this is a percentage based on the band. But one thing we do need to enter is the total attachment, which for this employee is going to be £5,500. And then the order issue date, which is actually the 1st of August. And then if you've got it as well, the order reference number. So this one, just a nice simple number. There we go. So that is all set up for my first employee. And that's going to deduct the council tax attachment until either this total attachment has been reached or until I'm ordered to put in an order end date. So if I've been notified to do that, I would come back into here and put in an end date, which would stop the attachment as well. I'll click Save and just move on to my next employee as well. And same again, pay elements and attachment of earnings orders. My second employee has a child support attachment that I need to add. Now, I've been told it has a normal deduction rate and that there's protected earnings of 60%. So I know that this is a more recent child support attachment, meaning it's actually going to be reference number 14, child support 2012. Now this attachment does use a normal deduction rate, so I am able to click in this box and specify what that is based on the information that I've been given. But again, you'll notice I can't enter a protected earnings, and that's because child support 2012 is set at 60% protected earnings. Total attachment, I am going to leave blank in this case, so it does tend to be an ongoing attachment. There's not normally a total to this, and this means that this is going to keep deducting the necessary amount until I'm instructed to stop the attachment, in which case I would enter the order end date. But again, I'll double check the order issue date and I'll pop in the 1st of August. And with child support as well, you do need to create a deduction schedule to send to the child maintenance people. So I'm going to enter an order reference number 2, super creative number. Of course, you pop in the correct one. But that is my second employee's attachment now, all set up. So again, I'll save that. Move on to my last employee's attachment. And we will go and add that now. So my third employee, this employee has a non-priority attachment. We were given a normal deduction rate and protected earnings, but we weren't told it was priority. So I'm going to add a non-priority, And notice this is actually the new name that we gave it to. So it was previously called 1971 Priority and Non-Priority, but I added that replacement description in. So we can see that change there. And I'll just select that from the drop down. And again, I'm going to enter the details. So normal deduction rate, £150. This time I can enter protected earnings, which I've been told is £1,000. And the total attachment amount, which is £3,000. Enter the order issue date. If I had the order reference, I would pop that in as well. And same with the order end date, of course, if I was notified with that. Now for this attachment, we actually don't need this tick box ticked. This attachment doesn't use the tables. It uses a normal deduction rate instead. So I could just leave that unticked, save the record, and that is all 3 of my attachments set up and assigned to my employees. So we'll just pop back to the slides, have a bit of a recap there. So I actually set up the admin fee for the council tax attachment in the company pay elements. And we also then check the pay element settings. So if payments were subject to be included towards the attachable pay, make sure those tick boxes are ticked. If not, make sure that they're cleared. We then assign the attachments in the employee's record. So we'd go to employment, pay elements, and then attachment of earnings orders. So you would select the attachment name from the drop-down. We had those replacement descriptions as well. And then you would enter in the information that you've been given. And just remember to check that tick box at the bottom. So if it is an attachment type that uses the tables, just make sure that is ticked and Payroll will work out that amount for you. So that could be things like council tax or direct earnings attachments as well. But with those attachments assigned and ready to go, that does bring us onto the next section, which is processing attachments. And we can check that they're going to be deducted in our next pay run. So for this, we're just going to dive straight back into Payroll. We'll take a look at those 3 attachments. So it's for employees number 1, 2, and 3. Now we can see I've already done July's payroll, so my last updated and last FPS date is the 31st of July. I've got a monthly payroll, and my next pay date is going to be 31st of August. So let me just double check my process date. Perfect. And then I'm going to go straight to enter payments for these employees. So starting with the first employee in my list, employee number 1, we can see I've got their salary in here. And I'm going to click across to the attachments tab just to check that information. So in here I can see the council tax attachment. I can see the attached value being calculated for me. I've got that £1 admin fee as well because I specified I did want to have that for a council tax attachment. The attachable earnings for the employee. And then I've actually got the amount deducted as well. So the attachable earnings as well, is actually the gross pay. Take away the tax and national insurance. So just in case you weren't aware of what that was there. So the amount deducted then, so how did this get to £361.62? So this depends on the tables and the employee's earnings as well, the attachable earnings. So just to remind us, I am going to pop back to the legislation. So company, legislation, and AEO rates. I'm going to select council tax. And for my monthly employee, with attachable earnings in excess of £2,020, it's going to be 17% up to the earnings of £2,020, then 50% for anything over that. So let's pop back to enter payments and work out how it's got to this amount. Bring up a calculator. Perfect. So employee number 1, the attachable earnings, we'll pop that in, is £2,056, 44 pence. Take away the £2,020 from the legislation tables, which is going to leave us with the excess. So remember, we need to find 50% of this excess. So we'll times that by 50%, which is £18.22. So this is 50% of the excess. Just keep that number in mind. We're then going to work out 17% of the earnings up to that £2,020. So £2,020, we'll find that 17%, which is £343.40. We'll add on that 50% of the excess again, which was £18.22. And that leaves us with £361.62. So that is how payroll is getting to that figure there. So that amount deducted this period, that'll be taken from the total attachment value, which we entered, I think was £5,500. And the attachment will be calculated and deducted until that total amount has been reached, or until I've been notified to stop the attachment, in which case I would enter an order end date. But we'll move on to employee number 2. So this employee's been given the child support attachment, which is deducting £240. I can click and edit this in here if I needed to, but I'm just going to leave this as is. No admin fee specified for this attachment type. And then we've got the attachable earnings again, which is the gross pay, take away the tax and national insurance. We've then got the amount deducted. So remember the child support 2012, the protected earnings is 60%. But as a result, we can see that full amount can be taken. The protected earnings hasn't stopped that attachment at all. Now let's say there's been a change of plan for this employee and they've actually fallen ill and then taken the full month on statutory sick pay. So I'm going to go to the Payments tab, remove their salary, and then go to SSP/parental leave, and I'm going to add in sickness for the whole month of August for them. So I've entered that sickness there as the employee had fallen ill. Now if I go to check the attachment, I can see the attachable earnings is the SSP amount plus this tax rebate here. And then 60% of that, if we just work it out, so 56445 is the new attachable earnings. 60% of this is the protected earnings, which is £338.67. So the net pay is not allowed to go below this, which is why we can see the net pay there as that figure. But as a result of this, it's not actually able to take that full £240. It's taking £225.78 instead. And notice it's carrying forward the remainder of that attachment value into the next period. So assuming the employee has sufficient attachable pay next period, this carried forward amount can be taken on top of the attachment's normal deduction rate. And I'll just save next onto my next employee. So this last employee with the attachment was the non-priority attachment of earnings, £150. Protected earnings in this example was £1,000. So as a result, it is able to take that full amount of £150. But again, let's have a change of plan here. So let's say they were on half pay this month, for example. Just reduce their salary to £1,000. And now when I go to check the attachment, we can see it's not able to take that full amount, as it would take it below the protected earnings of £1,000. So this is actually the maximum it can deduct, £9.60. But unlike the previous example, notice this one does not have a carried forward amount. That's because it's a non-priority. If it was a priority attachment, there would be a carried forward amount. But just a reminder there, it's because it's a non-priority attachment, there is no carried forward amount. But that is enter payments done for now, for this example today. And I am going to move on with the rest of my payroll. There are a few pre-update reports that I would like to show you. So we'll go ahead to click on pre-update reports from the payroll tasks. And the first one's just going to be a standard laser 2 per A4 sheet pay slip. I'm going to preview this. I'm going to include all of my employees and let those load up. And I'll just make that a little bit bigger for you as well. Here we go. So first employee, this is their pay slip. And we can see that council tax attachment and the amount there. So nice and clear on the pay slip for them. Same with employee number 2. So we enter that sick pay for them. We've got that amount on the left. And we can see that child support 2012 attachment with the value next to it there as well. And then third employee, we've got their salary, which we reduced to £1,000, and the non-priority AEO at £9.60. And remember, this actually was the name that we changed, so this was a replacement description, which we added at the beginning of the webinar. But I'm happy that my employee will have a bit more of an idea of what this is on their payslip with that replacement description. Another report I would recommend that you run if you do have attachments is the attachment of earnings report. So this is found in the summary section, and it's just the second one here. If I preview this, this is going to show more detail on the attachments themselves. So information on the attachment amounts, totals as well. So I would advise printing or exporting this one if you need to. It does have, for example, on the third one, let's go down. So third employee, we can see the original name of the attachment along with the replacement description as well. Perfect. Now, just to finish this demonstration, I do want to show you a quick look at next period as well. So I'm going to update my records. I'm going to skip a backup for today, but always take a pre-update backup at this point. And then I'm going to change my process date to next period, which is going to be 30th of September for me. And I would like to show you the attachment values for next period in enter payments. So employee number 1, I can see the attachment continues to deduct for them. So we've still got that same amount, £361.62, because there's been no difference to the pay as well. But let's go to employee number 2. I'm going to actually give them their wage back, so they're no longer on sick. I'll pop in their salary again. And if we go to attachments, I can see it is now able to take that full amount, and it's actually added on that carried forward amount as well. So it's taken the full £240 plus the £14.22, which was carried forward from last period. And then last thing as well, so my third employee, let's go back to payments and increase their salary again, which was £2,000. We'll pop back to attachments. And again, I can see that full amount being taken as normal. But remember, this was a non-priority attachment, so there's no carried forward amount from last period. It is just the straight £150, which was the deduction rate there. And before we move on to the next section as well, I do have a little top tip. So sometimes you will have employees who have got multiple attachments. There is a particular order that you would need to deduct them in. So priority attachments are going to be first in the order, the date order that they were received, followed by non-priority. So if I go to employee number 3's record, We'll go back to attachments. Let's say they actually received another attachment, so they had a council tax attachment come through. If I add that on, we can see it adds as priority number 2, but this is actually a priority attachment, so this would take priority over the existing attachment that's there. So if you do need to change this, for the existing one, just change that priority order to 0, set the priority one to 1, which will be the council tax one in this case, and then pop this non-priority one up to 2. So what that's done is switch them. They'll now be deducting in the correct order. So remember, that's priority first in the date order that you've received them, followed by non-priority attachment of earnings. There we go, and we'll just pop back to the slides now, have a little bit of a recap before we move on to the quiz. So the attachments tab in Enter Payments, this does give you all of the detail regarding the attachments. You've got the attachment value on the left, which is either going to be the normal deduction rate that you've added, or using the tables in the legislation in the company tasks. You've then got the admin fee, which is £1 if you've set that up. The attachable earnings, which is the pay remaining after tax and national insurance. And then the amount deducted, which is what's being taken, which obviously can be affected by protected earnings. Then if it's applicable, you will have carried forward amounts, again due to protected earnings, but this is only for priority orders. And I have attached a little bit more information on attachments at the bottom of this slide and throughout the presentation as well, so please do download the handouts if you'd like those. You will have a copy of the presentation and be able to check out those links as well. But that does bring us onto the last section of the webinar. Very exciting section is our quiz. Totally optional, but would be great for you to get involved and just test the knowledge that you've learned throughout the session as well. So how it works, I will run a poll from my end, and you'll just be able to select and submit your answer, and then I'll share the results and reveal the correct answer to you. So let me just get that sorted my side. We'll start with that first question, which should be coming up on your screen shortly. So question number 1 is going to be, where can you find the attachment of earnings tables in Sage 50 Payroll? So where can you find the attachment of earnings tables in Sage 50 Payroll? Is it going to be in company, legislation and AEO rates? Is it company pay elements and attachments? Or is it employee record, pay elements and attachment of earnings? Looks like most of you have got that right so far, but we'll leave that open for about a minute or so. So where can you find the attachment of earnings tables in Sage 50 Payroll? Great, I'll just give that a couple more seconds and then I'll close that down and reveal the correct answer. Fab, so I'm just sharing that to you now. 87% of you have said company, legislation and AEO rates. 9% have said company, pay elements and attachments, and 4% have said it's in the employee record, pay elements and attachment of earnings. And it's actually the first option which is correct, so well done to 87% of you. It is in the company legislation and attachment of earnings rates. So remember, you'll have that little drop down, you can select the attachment type and view the different rates, bands and rates for those attachment types. It's also where you'll find kind of all of the legislation in the programme, so tax, national insurance, parental payments, things like that. Super handy part of the programme. Great, so that was question 1. We'll move on to question 2 now. Let me launch that. Which is, which attachment type would you assign for a child maintenance attachment with 60% protected earnings? which attachment type would you assign for a child maintenance attachment with 60% protected earnings? I did try to hint at this one a few times throughout the session, so hopefully you kind of clocked onto that. So is it child support, deductions of earnings orders, or child support 2012? So which attachment type would you assign for a child maintenance attachment with 60% protected earnings? Fab, and again, looks like most of you got that right, but all shall be revealed very shortly. Great, it looks like most of you have voted now, so I'm going to close that and share the results. Fabulous, so 4% have said child support, 1% have said deduction of earnings order, and 95% have said child support 2012, which is the correct answer. So well done, 95% of you. It is the newer child support attachment, which does have that fixed 60% protected earnings. But again, you can check that in the legislation if you do need to. So well done to those of you who got that one correct. And then last question I've got for today before we finish off is coming your way now. So question number 3 is a true or false. If a non-priority attachment of earnings is not deducted due to protected earnings, it will be carried forward to the next period. Is that true or false? If a non-priority attachment of earnings is not deducted due to protected earnings, it will be carried forward to the next period. So is it true or is it false? I've got a little bit more of a mixed answer here, it looks like. But still most of you with that correct, so we'll see how that goes. So is it true or false? If a non-priority attachment of earnings is not deducted due to protected earnings, it will be carried forward to the next period. Fab, and I'm just going to close that and share the results with you. Fab, so about a third of you said true, about 2/3, 67% said false. And it is actually false. So well done to the 67% of you. So remember, a non-priority attachment of earnings won't have a carried forward amount. So if it can't take all of the amount, it just won't take it. But if it's a priority attachment of earnings, that's when it'll have that carried forward amount. And if it can take that in the next period, it will. So that was false. A little bit of a trick question there, but well done to them. Well done to you who got that right. There we go. So that is the 3 questions on the quiz. We do have just enough time to cover some further support as well before we finish the webinar. That is the end of the main content there. So thank you so much for your participation in that quiz. It's always fun to see how much you've learned throughout these as well. It makes me feel like I'm doing my job right, at least when most people get the answers right. So that's great. But yeah, we'll move on to some further support. So first thing I would like to kind of go over is webinars. So we do run these throughout the whole year for Sage 50 Payroll. Me and Duncan do these for Sage 50 Payroll, and we've got lots more coming up in the next month. So we have had a update being released recently for Payroll. We've got one more session of what's new in version 30.2 next week. So if you do want to get a bit more information about what the update involves, what's new in the update, absolutely come along to that. And Duncan will also be running a session on variance reporting next week as well. But then, of course, we move into September. We also have National Payroll Week coming up in early September. We've got 5 exclusive webinars planned for you all. Again, they're free to attend. You will have the opportunity to earn our free digital badge as well. So if you do want to kind of read about what's coming up, head to sage.com/webinars or click register now on the handout to read a little bit more about what they're going to include. And yeah, hopefully we will see you all there. We also have the help centre, sage.co.uk/help. You can search the knowledge base here, you can access support guides, demonstration videos, recordings of our webinars, and if you ever need to get in touch with our technical support or any of the experts we've got here, you do have the contact options for them as well. And then lastly is Sage University. So you can set up a free account here. You can access e-learning and bite-sized learning, as well as earning product certification as well. So if you do fancy trying to expand your knowledge a little bit on Sage 50 Payroll or some of the other Sage products that we offer, we would absolutely love you to head to sageu.com. And yeah, that brings us to the end of the session. So keep an eye on your emails for a recording of the webinar coming through. And yeah, we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Hopefully we'll see you on another webinar very soon. But on behalf of us, we'll see you next time. Goodbye for now.